It's when you just started talking about georeferencing and pulling information from the National Library of Scotland. Okay on all of that. And then you said go on QGIS to the browser.
Yep.
And I couldn't find a browser that looked anything like yours.
Right. So I actually have mine tucked away in the side panel there. Yeah. But not all of these panels are visible. Sorry, my bad. You can slap me on the wrist for that. I should probably have mentioned that if you're looking for a panel and you don't already have it open or it's nowhere on your screen, you can go up to View and Panels, and then you can tick the one that you want. So you can see browsers just there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you go into there and tick that, you'll get a browser. I've no idea what browser 2 is.
Right. So whilst you're talking there, I will do that. I got into Data Source Manager and I got the XYZ tiles, but I thought, okay, maybe not.
Well, to be fair, I really don't see why they have two different ways of doing this, because I've always used the Data Source Manager. This thing up here is what I'm used to. This is what I know, you know. I mean, if you look in here, for example, I've got all of my layers and things already set up, you know, like my primary Consett map there, for example, you know, if I connect, sorry, that's vector stuff. But I've got my, this is the one I was looking for. I've got all my maps and everything in there already. And it just seems bizarre that I can't add XYZ tiles in there. I have to go and find this bloody browser thing just to add XYZ tiles. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And I never did understand why the QGIS team did that, to be fair.
All right. So, the way I got into it was not quite the same as that, but I saved it as NLS. It's now appearing in there, but I haven't got a clue what it does because at that point I ran out of time. It's got a little leg timer going.
It's got a little. Oh, right. Okay.
Select transformation for NLS, right?
Yeah. So what you've done there is you've pretty much clicked on it and added it as a layer to your document, but you've added it as a full-size countrywide layer.
Okay.
So what your copy of QGIS is currently doing is trying to download every single raster tile for every area of the UK that map covers.
No, we don't really want to do that, do we?
And each of those tiles are only 256 pixels by 256 pixels with about an inch to a mile. So right now it's probably sitting trying to download in excess of about 4 million graphics tiles.
Yeah. So we don't want it to do that, really, do we?
No, no. If you remember, I was saying to you last week, maybe I didn't make the point clear enough.
Hi, Jeff.
But what you quite often want to do with a lot of these tiles and things, especially from sources like the NLS, is have a very, very simple document that has just something like a point or a rectangle in that you know you can zoom into. What I often do, for example, is I put a little pinpoint on the, the Sherburn Terrace Crossroads, where TSB Bank and that used to be. I normally put a little point in there. And I have this very, very simple file that just, all it has in is just this single point, nothing else. And when I zoom to layer and I zoom in my drawing so that I've got that point right there, and that point is about the size of my hand cursor, I know that I'm zoomed right in and I'm down to about 1 meter per like half a centimeter, something like that. You follow? And then that way, when I pull in some tile imagery like that, I'm only pulling in maybe like 10 meters by 10 meters if I'm lucky.
Right. You'll be presumably going over that again today, pulling in or not?
No, I wasn't planning on it.
Okay, right. What I've got is I've got the right tile, which is part of the steelworks, but it's just repeated numerous times. It hasn't actually imported the whole country. So,
right. So if your tiles are repeating, what you've done is you've put, when you've added the, you know, when you add the XYZ tile URL,
yeah.
what you've done is you've put it in with just the numbers in. You haven't substituted the numbers for the Z, X, and Y.
Right. It looks very pretty, I must say.
Right. So I will quickly go over that then, because obviously there's a couple of things there that I did actually mention them last week, but I must have skipped over them a bit too fast.
Yeah, you went through an awful lot.
But give me a second, because I need to find this folder. There we go, with the files in for today's session. I'm assuming that those of you who wanted to have a play along have downloaded the files already.
I've downloaded them, yes.
Yeah, because if you haven't, then I really wouldn't try it, not while I'm actually on the Zoom session, because you'll screw the bandwidth up on the video feed. Right, okay. Let me show you. Before we get started, well, we might as well start officially-ish. Are you recording already, Richard?
I am.
Right. Do you want to do your little speech thing first?
Well, here's Lee. Just thank you for coming again. It's basically Peter will take us through the next stage, but I think he's going to recap a couple of bits by the sound of it.
Yes.
So enjoy, ask questions as you go, and other people can join us as and when. So I'll hand over to Peter.
Right. Okay, so I'll do a little bit of a recap then. I'll just grab one of my maps here. Hang on, no, I won't. I'll load in one that I've already got. This is what you really, as I was trying to say to, I think was it Dave that was speaking?
It was Robert.
It was Robert. Sorry, Robert.
Yeah, okay.
So as I was trying to say, what you ideally want to have is you ideally want to have a project that you always use that's centered around the area where you're mostly going to be working. I don't know if this one will load. Yeah, it looks like it's going to. There we go. So you can see that this is already sort of zoomed in, yeah? And what you ideally want, as you can see there, this is actually, I think it's actually, yeah, oh no, it's not. It's pulling these in from elsewhere. I thought this was pulling them in live from the old maps server. So let's, yeah, you can see the delay in loading the tiles. And if I zoom out, you'll see that delay gets progressively longer the more I zoom out.
At the moment, I'm just seeing a frozen screen, but I think it's my end rather than yours.
Quite possible.
Yeah, it's just sitting there.
Yeah, so for those who can see my screen updating, okay, you can see there now I've only gone out by 3 zoom levels, and it's sitting there taking an age to load them. And of course, the other problem is as well, when QGIS is busy doing something like this, sadly, there is no way to stop it. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to select an area where you frequently work. So you can see the more I zoom in, the faster the tiles. The only other problem is though, the more you zoomed in, the longer it takes you to scroll to an area that you want. Come on, you stupid thing. Come on, come on, come on. There we go. I think we're near in Ledgate somewhere. See, ideally, this is not really a problem if you're dealing with vector imagery. Do you know what? I'm just going to do it here. I'm not going to try and get to Consett Town Centre because we'll run out of time otherwise. So ideally, what you want to do is find an area where you work mostly, and then go to this little icon up here, this little chip icon. Now, the chip icon is what's called a temporary scratch layer. And scratch layers are not saved when you save your project. Or actually, they are saved, but any imagery that you draw into them is not saved. It's discarded. Yeah. So they're like little notepads for your GIS project. So what we'll do is we'll create a new scratch layer, and we'll say my center point. And then we'll give it a point. And remember our magic numbers, especially 27700. Make sure that's right. And then that will give me this layer here. And you can see it's got this little chip symbol next to it. Create some geometry on it. And then we'll put that dot on there. And we'll save it, make sure it's in the layer. And we will give it a nice bright red color. And increase its size a little bit. Just so we can see it and find it. Yep. And then what we're going to do is we're going to export just that one spot. It's up to you what you use. You can use a shape file, you can use a geo package. It's probably simple enough to use our good friend Google Earth when I can find it. There it is, our keyhole markup language. And I'm just going to kick this onto the desktop as my center point. Now, since I'm not really planning on you loading this into Google Earth, it doesn't really matter what my EPSG is. But if I did want to load it into Google Earth, remember I'd need to make it 4326. So, okay, I don't want to add it to my map. Everything else is fine there. I'm just going to OK, and it's going to tell me that it's saved it. Now, put that somewhere safe, because what you can then do, if we create this is the temporary layer box you're seeing there. If you create a new layer, so we've got a new project here now, it's completely blank. All it knows is that it's in EPSG 27700, but it doesn't know where in the world it is. Yeah, basically that white screen represents the whole of the UK, or the whole of the bounds that 27700 represents. If you were working at something like 4326, which is the WSG standard, the worldwide one, then that whole white screen would represent the entire globe. So what you will then probably want to do, I'm just going to drag it on by dragging it in from my desktop like that. But you'll see, you'll get that dot there now. And if I go to that dot and I just zoom right in on it, keep it in the center of my screen, as central as I can, you'll see that my scale here is getting down really low, 1756, something like that. You're almost down to street level. If I then go and pull in one of my XYZ tiles layers, something like that one. There you go. You see how fast that loaded up? Because of, you can see from the tile how closely zoomed into I am. Now, if I'd done that without zooming in on the spot, I would have still been sitting here in 2 hours' time waiting for it to load the entire of the UK in. Being too far zoomed in is always better than being too far zoomed out. See, as I zoom out, you can see the delay as it loads the tiles in. Yep. And the further out I go, the more of those tiles it has to load. And as you can see, our spot is right at the middle point of where that other map was that I left the spot on as well. We good with that?
Yeah.
Yep. What was the other thing that? Oh, that's right. The actual URLs. So when you do your XYZ tile URLs, if you go in and edit a tile setup that you've got, you'll see that I've got these X, Y, and Z markers in. Let's bring that into Notepad, see if I can make it a bit bigger. So we'll whack that font size up a bit. So you can see I've got these Z, X, and Y markers in. The Z is the zoom level and is usually the first of the two, and then the X and the Y. Yeah. Now, if you put the numbers in it, if you grab a URL from the browser, as I showed you last week, for example, and you do something like this, then for every request that QGIS makes to download one of those tiles, it will always load that exact same tile over and over again. Yeah, because you're fixing those coordinates. What QGIS does is it looks for these markers. Yeah. Now your zoom is nearly always in the same place, but your X and Y, depending on the server that's serving them, may be reversed. So if you put it in X and Y first and the map seems back to front, try swapping your X and your Y round. Sometimes you do have to fiddle with them a little bit, but if you forget to put those markers in and just leave the numbers in, that's what causes repeated tiles. All right. Anything else before I get on with georeferencing?
Rob's gone for the minute. I imagine his internet went. So just crack on with this session.
All right, no worries. I see we've got our Facebook group newcomer joining us just there, Mr. Cook.
Yep.
I hope you find something interesting in all of this. Right, so I'll start myself a new project again. And you'll see we've got a blank list of layers. Now, if you recall last week where we left off, I mentioned that the next stage is learning how to georeference maps. And I think it was you actually, Dave, that asked whether it was possible to take a picture of a land outline of a barn or something and get it into the map. I know somebody did. I can't remember who anyway. Well, that's basically what I'm going to show you how to deal with today. Now, generally, when you get a raster file, such as a TIFF or a PNG or something like that, they normally, unless they've been specially prepared beforehand, they normally do not have any information attached to them that tells you about the file. So I've just dragged the TIFF file into QGIS, the one that I provided for you to download. And the first thing it's asked me is, well, what's your EPSG code for this? Now, I happen to know that this is 27700. However, you may not know that ahead of time. So generally, if you don't know your EPSG code, it's safe to pick the same one that your project is set to. So we'll OK that, and it'll load in. Now, right off the bat here, this potentially is looking, well, OK, I've got it loaded into QGIS. I can see that it's a map, and I can draw on it, and it makes complete sense. But if we go down to the bottom corner of this map, and if you just want to look at my coordinates there, keep your eye on this coordinate box here at the bottom. If I move to the bottom corner of the map, you'll see that says -6 by -7839. Now, there's no way that that is a location within Consett, because first of all, we're somewhere up on the 59th parallel in latitude. So the second number should be 50,000 something plus and not minus. By default, any raster imagery that you use will always start at 00. It's the same as any picture. If you load a picture into a paint package or into Photoshop or something like that, one corner is always 00. And then from there, your X and your Y direction go in increasing numbers to the size of the pixels. If you've got a raster image that's 4,000 by 4,000 pixels, then its coordinate system will be from 0 to 4,000, 0 to 4,000. Yep. Now, what georeferencing does is georeferencing allows you to map those known coordinates. So as I said already, I know that here in the UK, we're up somewhere around about the 59th, between the 50 and the 59th parallel in latitude. So what you need in order to map those points properly is you need a source map. Now, fortunately for us here in the UK, the Ordnance Survey provide loads of good products, and I would heartily advise anybody who's interested in all at doing things like this to go and seek out the Ordnance Survey Open Data Portal and get yourself a free order downloaded. They don't sadly do DVDs anymore, everything's online, but if you'd gone back sort of a couple of years while they were still in the heyday, you could actually write to them. In fact, I used to do it every 6 months. I had a repeated order that I'd sent into them, and then a couple of weeks later, the DVDs would actually get posted out to me. But get yourself a good source of data and use that to reference the map that you've got. Now, this one I've dragged into QGIS. I'm just going to remove for now, because we don't actually load the layer that we're going to reference into QGIS until after we've referenced it. Instead, what we'll do, if you've downloaded the files, you'll find a zip file called Modern Day Raster Map. If you just want to unzip that to somewhere on your hard drive, has this one? Yep, it has. And then grab the 4 TIFF files that you find in there and drag them into QGIS. You should find that QGIS loads them in like this. And if we zoom in, there's Sherburn Terrace Crossroads. If we zoom in and move our pointer to Sherburn Terrace Crossroads, if you look at the coordinate at the bottom here now, just at the bottom of the screen there, when I move over at Sherburn Terrace Crossroads, you'll see the numbers are drastically different. Yeah. So 55,825.1. So it's up on the 55th parallel. And we're 410 meters to the east from Bell Rock Lighthouse. So those numbers are what I would expect. Now, your georeferencing tool can be activated by finding anything that has this icon on. I have it on my toolbox here, but if you don't have it on your toolbar, you might actually find it up here in the raster menu called Georeferencer. When you click on that, a new window will open. And this new window is where you need to load in the image that you want to georeference. So in this case, we'll actually load in the TIFF file. Now, you can't drag on this, unfortunately, so you've got to go File, Open Raster, and then I'll load up the TIFF. And again, it'll ask me what EPSG code I'm in. You need to make sure that your EPSG code matches, because if you don't get it right, then the points that you put on this map won't be in the right place. We discussed that last week. Once you're happy with that, okay. Now you can actually see that I've got a lot of points already loaded in. And the reason I've already got a lot of points loaded in is because if you load a raster file in and you have this file here, this tiff.points file, then any points that are in that will automatically be loaded in for you to continue geo-referencing things where you left off. So in my case, I was practicing this the other day. Now, what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to rename that points file, and I'm going to start from scratch because I don't actually want that there's things I need to sort of discuss about the points. So I'm just going to restart that process. File, open raster.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes. Okay, I'm assuming that was Richard because he seems to have stepped away from the PC. Right. Okay, so we'll try that again. So I'm going to load this in and it's going to ask me for my EPSG code. So we'll load that back in and you can see now there is no points on this. Now, if we zoom out on this map, you'll see that we have got the areas that we're going to attempt to geocode because you can see here, you can see the commonalities. There's the bypass going around Leadgate. There's the bypass going around Leadgate. A good road map is probably one of the best things that you can have for geo-referencing with. And the reason for that is because roads don't change very often. Yeah. And not only that, as I'll show you shortly, there's a vector one as well. And those vectors that you get for the roads provided by the Ordnance Survey Open Data are the center lines of all the roads. So they're kind of the meeting points of junctions and things. And as you may have already guessed, what we are essentially going to do is we're going to find locations on this map that we recognize and can find on this map, and then we're going to pinpoint them, and we're going to tell QGIS whereabouts they relate. So let's zoom in on this, and we'll choose pan, this hand up here, so we can scroll the map around. And, well, let's start at the middle of Sherburn Terrace Crossroads. So to place a point, we go to this tool here, add point. We click on that and then we find our location on the map. So let's try and get it about center in the crossroads and this will pop up. Now what it's asking you here is what the two coordinates for the location are on this map. Now, unless you're some kind of GIS genius, there's absolutely no way that you're going to know off the top of your head what those coordinates are. So we have this handy little button here called From Map Canvas. And if I click on that and I zoom in and scroll around on my main map, get in nice and close and just click on the center, you'll see that it'll jump back now when I've picked those coordinates from the live map, the map that QGIS already knows the locations on. And there we go. Okay, that's number one. Yeah. And it is essentially just a question of picking good locations. Now, if you read up on any of this online, a lot of people will be quick to tell you that you only need to get the four corners. So if I go dunk, 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 that's all I need to do. Well, that's a load of rubbish because the more points you have, the more accurate of a job the georeferencer can actually do. And the other problem with doing corners like that, well, let's go and take a look up here. Colliery Wood doesn't have any good roads going through it. Yeah. Now, we can geolocate other features, like we've got a river here and we've got a footpath there and a fence, you know, and we can sort of follow the shape of the river. But, you know, that's not always a really good way of doing it, you know. Roads, buildings and fixed structures that don't change are your best bet. They're always the best way to do things, you know. Another option you've got is here. We've got a power line going down through the middle with a pylon there. That's actually, if I'm not mistaken, NER 243, which goes across by Pontop Pike. Yes, it is. So it goes across the Dipton Road and then across the Greencroft Road. So road junctions, roundabouts, things like that. So pick a location, get it as central as you can. I'm not using the trackball, by the way, so that's why that's wobbling a bit. And then from your map canvas, zoom, pan, click, okay. Now, one thing I will say when you're geolocating like this, don't change your tools while you're in map pick mode, right? What you'll do is you'll lose your map pick if you do that. So if we go here to Ledgate Crossroads, for example, add a point and put it into map pick mode. If I then go and change to my pan map tool to move around, that's the crossroads. You'll see that there's no option there for me to get my map picker back. Yeah. What you have to do instead is you have to go back to the georeferencer, I think. No, sorry. Okay, that's interesting. I seem to have caught myself off guard there. I think I've actually broken QGIS. I seem to have lost the georeferencer altogether. Well, that was a lot of good, wasn't it? Right, okay, well, you saw it here first, folks. I think I've just found a bug that I need to report to the QGIS team. So to recover that, it looks like, no. Yeah, I've completely caned that, and I can't bring my georeferencer back either. Normally what happens is if you press Alt-Tab on a Windows system, you get up this sort of this on-screen thing that has all your open windows open. And generally in there will be the georeferencer window, and you can just Alt-Tab and switch back to it. But in my case, it doesn't seem to want to do that. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to kill this and reload it. So I do apologize for that, folks.
Peter, I don't know if it's a common problem, but when I was trying to close or work on GIS whilst you were talking, it froze at 7 minutes past 7, and I've just managed to get back in on my phone. So I'm joined you on my phone, but my computer is just about recovering. And that was me trying to close the XYZ tile pane.
Yeah, in that case, though, I mean, as I say, that was to be expected because of the volume of the tiles you were trying to load in.
Yeah,
you know?
It just killed the computer completely.
It will, and it is, unfortunately, for a lot of this type of work, you do have to have a machine that has a decent amount of grunt. You
Yes.
know? I mean, I'm sitting here with a 3 gigahertz 8-core i7. It's, with a gaming graphics card in. But I do a lot of other stuff as well as just GIS, you know. So you may not need that level of power, but yeah, you do need a fair amount of grunt. And to be fair as well, memory's probably more important than speed. You know, if you can put sort of 16 gigs of memory in your machine as opposed to maybe 4 gigs, you'll get better performance than putting a faster CPU in, you know? Right.
I've got another 4 gig to put in, but
Right. Anyway, so now that we've recovered that, another thing that helps greatly for this type of work as well is to put an SSD hard drive in. The new sort of these things.
yeah, I've got one in a box ready to go in. I just
Yep.
need to do it.
SSDs make a huge amount of difference. You know, every drive that's in this machine down here that I've got down to the left of me here, every drive in there is an SSD drive, and the things like lightning. Right. So after that little setback, it wouldn't have been any good if the demo gods didn't decide to take a bite, would it? So yes, so don't change your tool while you're georeferencing, because things like that happen. Now, there's not really much more for me to say other than get a good coverage and get a good coverage of points on your map. If I load in the points that I've already created now, I didn't want them loading automatically before because, you know, I didn't want to complicate the map. But you can see that I've got some right up in the corners, and you can see a lot of them are on road junctions. You know, Medhamsley Crossroads, things like that. If you've got a good 3 or 4-way junction, you will quite often find that if you're using some kind of vector imagery, the Ordnance Survey will actually link the road in sort of a shape, yeah, like a 3-way shape. So like here, for example, at the main junction where the War Memorial is in Medhamsley, I've got 3 points, and that's because of the 3-way junction. Now, if you have access to it, you also are going to want to use vector. If you look in the files that I provided for you to download, you'll find an OS Open Roads vector. And what I've done with that is I've took just the vector roads for the Consett area that match that tile I'm trying to georeference, and added only them instead of the whole UK-wide OS Roads project. But that OS Open Roads, if you download it, has every road in the UK, and it's constantly being updated. So it's always a good one to go and get a hold of. If I drag that in, and we'll just turn my rasters off here for a moment, you'll see that I've got this nice vector. Somebody say something? No? Now, if I zoom in on the same junction on Medhamsley, you'll see that there's that 3-way junction that I was talking about. And the advantage of using vector is that point there where the 2 lines join is, for all wants and purposes, as far as the Ordnance Survey is concerned, the center of the junction. So if you can imagine, for example, let me just stick a scratch layer on here temporarily so I can demonstrate what I'm on about. If you can imagine your actual road looking somewhat like this. I know it's not to scale. But if you can imagine your road looking somewhat like that, as far as the Ordnance Survey are concerned, where these joins are, they are the centre points on the roads and the junctions of the roads. And this is one of the reasons why it's a good idea to georeference the roads, especially if you've got the vector imagery. Other layers you can get something called OS Open Map, again from the Ordnance Survey Open Data Portal, and that has building footprints on. Now, all of this will be modern, but if you know of locations where you have old buildings that are still in situ from the time period of the map that you're digitising, it still helps. Case fact, if we go to our primary target, Consett Steelworks, this is actually the 1980s map that I have here. Yeah, so you can see this has actually already been largely removed. What we can do is we know that some of these buildings along here, sort of Berry Edge Road and what have you, well, actually, we've got a really good source there. If we were to georeference these buildings here, which are the only buildings that are left that are part of the works, that's the old generator house, those are the Berry Edge workshops there. Locating the corners of those buildings really, really accurately, and anything that we might have had sort of outside the map, as far outside the map as we can get, that would have located this area in the centre here without us having to put any points in it. Likewise, the road network, the roundabouts, things like that, railway lines. If you've got good vector points will help you more than any raster map will. But if you don't have vector points, raster maps are easier to eyeball because you can get a feel for the thickness of the road, and you can get a feel for the thickness of the road on the rasters behind as well. Am I making sense here, by the way? Yep.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's disagreed with me so far, so I must be doing something right. And that's essentially it. Just get a good coverage. It takes time and patience. Don't be in a rush to do this. If you've got maps that are not georeferenced and you want to georeference them accurately, take your time. Yeah? If you've got to spend 5 minutes just sitting wobbling your cursor around like that to get it as accurate as you want, that's what you're going to do. Because the more accurate and the more lined up you get it, the better things are. Once you've got sufficient points, and sufficient points is usually 5, 6 or more. Like I said earlier, the more points, the better. But 5 or 6 or more, you're going to be able to georeference stuff, especially if they're all sort of stretched out. Once you're happy, go up to your cog and set your output up. So here we're going to call that modified, I think. Yep, I don't have a modified one there. So we're going to call this one by its original name with modified tacked on at the end. Don't worry about the other options. You don't need to worry about world files and things like that. We'll save that for another day. What you might want to do, however, is experiment with the different options here. Now, I tend to just use linear and nearest neighbor. That always gives me decent results. But these different methods, linear, Helmert, polynomial. They're all different mathematical algorithms that QGIS uses to change that point there to that point there, and conversely stretch the map and resize things if it needs to make it fit. Yeah. Like I say, linear and nearest neighbor usually works for me. If you want to shrink the size of your tiles down, then you can put different types of compression on. I'm not going to bother with that. And there's other bits and pieces. You can generate reports and that, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go linear nearest neighbor, pick my target SRS, which is 27700. Remember, EPSG codes are always important. And then OK. Now you'll see what it's actually done there is it's updated some of these values in here. DX, DY, and residual. And the reason it's done that is because it's found that when it's resized the map, it's done something called rubber sheeting, which is stretching the map or compressing it a bit to make it fit in. And it's found that the points that I've placed versus the points on the maps have a little bit of overhang. You know, there's a little bit of a fractional bit left over. There's a rounding error, if you like. And it's telling you these are the rounding errors that I've worked out. None of them are particularly drastic. However, if you geo-reference in maps and you routinely see these sort of in the 50s, 60s, 100s, things like that, really big values, then you're not getting your geo-referencing done very accurately. And you're quite possibly even using two different EPSG codes. Yeah. So that now, once you, sorry, I missed a step there, didn't I? So you do your settings. Once you've done your settings, you close your settings, you click on the green arrow, and you'll see, as it just did with mine there, the bar sort of whizzed up a little bit. And then your geo-referencer will close automatically, as it's just done on me. And at that point, you will find you now have two files. So you can see I've got my original there that I dragged into QGIS, and I've got my newly modified one there, which is the one I've just geo-referenced. And if I drag that geo-referenced file, the one that I've just saved, into my QGIS, there we go. You should see that it is now perfectly lined up with the map underneath. And we can take a better look at that if we sort of pan and zoom in onto some of the roads here, like the Greencroft Road, for example, just past East Castle. You can see the roads on the two maps are lined up really, really well. Same up here, just as we go into Dipton. That's lined up, even to the point where I've actually got the elbow. And this is actually good considering what I've got here, because the map that I use to geo-reference it is actually a lower resolution than the map I'm geo-referencing. And of course, if you remember last week, we did that little test where we drew something on the map and then we loaded it into Google Earth. So if we just whiz across into the town centre, for example, okay, let's pick, well, it's probably the whole block, not just the Freemasons, but it'll do for our purposes. So we'll create a scratch layer, we'll make a polygon, we'll make it EPSG code 2770, and we'll draw ourselves a rectangle around that entire block. And then we'll export that out, save features as KML. We'll chuck that on my desktop as Front Street. We don't want to add it to my map because we've already got it. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, that. And we should hopefully find now. If we load that into Google Earth. Oh, hang on. I give it the wrong APSG code, didn't I? But remarkably, it's actually worked, surprisingly enough. And you can see that that's around that block on Front Street. So we know just by doing that small test there, drawing that rectangle, using our newly geo-referenced map as the source of that rectangle, we know that we've geo-referenced that map correctly. And where's QGIS gone? Well, I do believe. Oh no, there it is. I thought it had crashed on me. And you can see that we now have that section there is properly referenced with the rest of the map. We all good with that? Makes sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Questions?
My problem is whenever I export my stuff, it's always appearing in the Bering Strait. And I've tried everything, all the references on all the codes are correct in every layer. But I just can't understand why it appears in the Bering Strait.
Right. The Bering Strait is a long way off from Consett. So that suggests to me that it's recording WGS codes into the file. For the distance that it's off, Dave, if it had been sort of Consett but appearing down in the bottom corner of the UK, I would have said, well, okay, you probably just need to move your map a little bit, something like that. But for it to appear in the Bering Straits, that has to be a mismatched code somewhere. So first thing to do when something like that happens, check your project properties. Yeah. Your CRS should be the CRS that you're using. If you've got this box ticked, try unticking it, because sometimes having that ticked and letting QGIS or magically funky monkey about with your coordinate systems can sometimes cause you a lot of problems. Yeah. So if you've got that ticked, try unticking it. Make sure you're on 27700 there. And then when you export, make sure that you've got your 27700 there as well. Yeah. If that doesn't work, then grab hold of me on Facebook and send me some of your shape files and I'll take a look at them and see if I can figure out what's going on. Because if you're absolutely 100% sure that your EPSG codes are correct and your project EPSG code is correct, then it's possible that there's something going wrong with your installed copy of QGIS or something else weird. It's not something that I can give you a straight answer to right here. What I'd need to do is I'd need to have a look at the data that's in the files myself and have a look to see what codes are in the file, whether the negative numbers or not, and what the number range is. If you understand what I'm saying, it's something that through years of experience I've got used to being able to tell. I can generally guess by looking at the number ranges in the file what the EPSG where QGIS thinks it is, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Great. Cheers for that. I'll try that. Thank you.
No worries. Right. Anybody else?
Peter.
Yep.
What's the cost of the software for everything
QGIS.
you've done today? Is the Google Maps, is that free, is it?
Google Earth is free. QGIS is free. All of the Ordnance Survey data that you'll use is free. Everything's free.
Oh, that's fantastic.
If you watch the video from last week, last month, sorry, which was part 1 of this mapping series, that shows you where to download QGIS from.
Right. It's one hell of a tool, like, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's amazing. And all of this is maintained by people in the community, much like myself, who have a passion for mapping.
Right. So as I understand, your project is to put all the Consett Ironworks buildings in yards